A dormant volcano of secrets has just erupted, sending a fresh plume of ash and fire across the global elite. The so-called Epstein files, long sealed, suppressed, and fought over in the shadows of the justice system, have exploded open once more. This is not a trickle of information, it is a torrent. A new cache of documents, depositions, and flight logs has been unsealed by a federal judge, acting on intense media pressure. The pages are hitting the public domain right now, and the names contained within are not just repeating the familiar, infamous circle. They are pulling in new figures deeper into the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein's predatory network. We are talking about world-renowned scientists, titans of finance beyond the usual suspects, and political operatives from multiple continents. The context is critical. This release stems from a long-dormant 2015 civil defamation lawsuit filed by Virginia Giuffre against Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. The case settled, but the evidence gathered, thousands of pages, remained under seal. For years, powerful lawyers have spent millions fighting to keep these names hidden, arguing for privacy and confidentiality. Their efforts have now failed. The judge's order is a seismic event in the pursuit of accountability. It is a direct challenge to the wall of silence that has protected Epstein's associates. The first pages are already circulating among investigative journalists. The details are not mere salacious gossip. They form a mosaic of a sophisticated criminal enterprise, one that leveraged wealth, influence, and a facade of respectability to exploit young women and girls. This is about the mechanics of power, how it creates impunity, how it silences victims, and how it operates in plain sight, hidden behind private islands, gated estates, and the hulls of private jets. The newly unsealed depositions are perhaps the most explosive. Witnesses, some previously unknown, describe in stark detail the recruitment process. They name properties used as hubs, not just Epstein's New York mansion and his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, but also luxurious compounds in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Paris. They detail a system of massages that were a euphemism for abuse, and a network of recruiters who were rewarded handsomely. One deposition points to a European socialite, a close friend of Maxwell's, who allegedly acted as a talent scout at exclusive European parties. Another witness describes being instructed to be open-minded and pleasing to a specific billionaire hedge fund manager, whose name now appears with startling frequency in the logs. This is no longer just about Epstein and Maxwell. This is about the clients, the enablers, the guests who turned a blind eye. The flight logs for Epstein's private jets, nicknamed the Lolita Express, have been partially public for years. But this new release includes previously redacted passenger manifests and internal scheduling emails. They show a staggering volume of travel for a man with no visible legitimate business. The destinations are telling: New York to Palm Beach, New York to St. Thomas, Paris to Teterboro. And on these flights, a rotating cast of powerful men. A celebrated artificial intelligence pioneer is listed multiple times. A former European prime minister appears on a manifest for a flight to the Caribbean. A retired top executive from a major Silicon Valley firm is named. These are not just associates. They are passengers on a vessel of alleged criminality. The documents also shed light on the operational security of Epstein's world. Coded language in emails, instructions to staff to never discuss what happens in the massage rooms, requests for young female assistants to be present at certain dinners. The depravity was systematic and carefully managed. It was a business with a product, access to young bodies for powerful men. The political implications are thermonuclear. While former President Bill Clinton's numerous flights are reconfirmed, the new files delve deeper into the nature of his visits. A staffer's email discusses preparing the guest house for his arrival with guests. The ambiguity is chilling. Furthermore, names of several prominent Democratic donors and a senior advisor to a past Republican administration appear in connection with visits to Epstein's private island, Little St. James. The island, dubbed Orgy Island by staff, was the ultimate secluded playground. The files include inventories of the island's contents, painting a picture of a place designed for illicit pleasure far from prying eyes. The scientific community is now facing its own reckoning. Epstein, after his 2008 conviction, aggressively cultivated an image as a science philanthropist. He donated to Harvard, MIT, and rubbed shoulders with Nobel laureates. The new documents suggest this was not just reputation laundering. Emails show him discussing his genetics research with a famed evolutionary biologist, proposing funding for a study on human intelligence and selective breeding. The conversations venture into deeply disturbing eugenicist territory, revealing a sinister intellectual underpinning to his crimes. He saw his access to young women as part of a twisted, grandiose scientific project. The financial web is more intricate than previously known. Epstein's money, always mysterious, is shown flowing through a series of opaque trusts and shell companies in the Virgin Islands and Cyprus. Transaction records, while incomplete, show multi-million-dollar payments to individuals described as consultants in Eastern Europe. This suggests an international human trafficking operation, not just a series of isolated abuses in the United States. The files also reference a black book that was digital, not just paper, containing encrypted contact lists for global elites. The legal fallout is immediate. Lawyers for victims have already announced they are reviewing the documents for new potential defendants in civil cases. This is a roadmap to culpability, one attorney stated. The statute of limitations may bar many criminal prosecutions, but civil suits seeking financial damages can still proceed. The unsealing could trigger a wave of new litigation against estates, corporations, and living individuals named within. The role of the justice system itself comes under scrutiny. Portions of the documents detail Epstein's attempts to influence prosecutors during his first Florida case. Notes from a meeting with then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, who later became Labor Secretary, are referenced. They suggest a negotiation far beyond a standard plea deal, one that actively protected co-conspirators from federal investigation. This is the heart of the conspiracy. The use of political and legal influence to create a shield of immunity. The media's own complicity is noted. Several pages mention a prominent television host who visited Epstein's ranch, though no allegations of wrongdoing by the host are made in these specific papers. The point is the normalization. Powerful figures from media, politics, science, and finance lent Epstein their credibility simply by associating with him, allowing his predation to continue unchecked for decades. The international dimension is vast. The files include visa applications for young women from Eastern Europe and South America, facilitated by Epstein's connections. Phone records show calls to addresses in Saudi Arabia and a royal palace in the United Arab Emirates. This was a global network, and the new documents provide the first real glimpse of its international nodes and pathways. The psychological portrait of Epstein that emerges is of a man who believed his wealth and intelligence placed him above morality. In one email exchange with a colleague, he muses that social norms are for the middle class. He viewed himself as a predator at the top of the food chain, and the elite world, through its silence and participation, largely affirmed that belief. For the victims, this release is a double-edged sword. It is validation of their stories, a powerful rebuttal to those who called them liars, but it is also a re-traumatizing event, splashing their horrific experiences across global headlines once more. Their courage in facing Epstein and Maxwell in court is what made this day possible. Their testimony is the bedrock of this entire sordid revelation. The public reaction is a mixture of outrage and grim satisfaction. The suspicion that the full story was being suppressed is now confirmed. The scale of the cover-up hinted at for years is laid bare in dry legal prose. The question on everyone's mind, who else fought to keep this sealed? Which powerful law firms? Which political figures lobbied behind the scenes? The names of the lawyers arguing for secrecy may be as telling as the names in the flight logs. The historical context is that of a perfect crime, enabled by a broken system. Epstein exploited the vulnerabilities of the marginalized, the greed of accomplices, and the cowardice of the powerful. His death in a Manhattan jail cell in 2019 did not end the story. It merely transferred the quest for justice from the criminal to the civil sphere and into the court of public opinion. As analysts dig deeper, patterns will emerge. Clusters of names that traveled together, dates that coincide with major political or financial events. The files are a social network analysis of the dark underbelly of global power. They show who was invited into the inner circle and who was merely a useful acquaintance. The next few days will see a frenzy of reporting. Every name will be scrutinized, every date cross-referenced with public schedules. Denials will be issued. Social visits and scientific discussions will be the stated reasons for contact. But the sheer weight of the evidence, The pattern of behavior across hundreds of pages paints a picture that isolated denials cannot erase. This is a story about corruption in its truest sense, the corruption of power, of justice, and of basic human decency. The Epstein files are not exploding again due to luck. They are exploding because of relentless pressure from journalists, victims' advocates, and a judge who finally decided the public's right to know outweighs the powerful's desire for secrecy. This is a victory for transparency, however dark the revealed truth may be. The final chapter is not written. This release will trigger more investigations, more lawsuits, and perhaps, finally, more criminal referrals. The explosion is not the end. It is the detonation that clears the rubble, allowing us to see the full, horrifying foundation of a world that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to exist. The powerful names that resurface today will now face a reckoning they have delayed for a generation. The spotlight is on. There is nowhere left to hide.